Right, back again at our swarm hive. So I've got the right equipment and I've had time to plan my strategy. Now, these supers then, so you see that they're shorter and the frames in those are actually for honey. So what I want to do is I want to try and get these girls into this brood box. So you see this is deeper and is more appropriate for the sort of size that the brood nest needs to be for the bees. Now, I do know of some beekeepers, I know my mum tried it because it's a little bit kinder on the back, that keep bees in nothing but these because they're then a little bit less to lift and you can work your way through. But it means that every time you inspect you're breaking it in half, which can sometimes irritate them a little bit more. So I don't like to do that. I may switch to this as I get older and my back tires, but for the moment I can do nice big deep brood boxes. So one of our challenges here is these bees coming in and out now will be geographically fixed. They've made their little map of lovely pollen coming in here. They've made their little map of where home is, and so this entrance I need to move fairly slowly and gradually. So I'm probably going to take out this wooden brood box. I've still got a little bit of wood equipment left around, and I try not to use it anymore. I do like polystyrene much more, but I have this as sort of reserve stuff. And so what I'll do, I'll lower this entrance by about this much. I'll probably put them on one of the crates there and just lower it gradually. And then I'm going to have a look and see if there's any brood. If there's any eggs and brood in here, then they're going to have to keep this brood box beneath the supers beneath the brood box. If the queen hasn't started laying yet, which sometimes there is a delay after they've swarmed, what I'm going to try and do is put her below a queen excluder and let them get to work below the queen excluder and just have this super on top where they've probably put quite a lot of the honey that they swarmed with. Now these bees haven't come out of my own hives, so all my own hives down here are all accounted for. It doesn't look like a swarm's come out of those, so these will be from the neighbourhood. Now I know there are one or two beekeepers around Newport, but it's entirely possible that they've come out of a wild colony, and people are unaware of quite how many wild honeybee colonies there are out there, and so they've probably come unmanaged. In the normal course of things I'd move these off because you just don't know what their status of disease is, but as they're from the area, my own bees will likely have been exposed to anything that these bees have been exposed to as well, and so the risk isn't really increased by leaving them here. If I was called out to a swarm somewhere on the Isle of Wight, which is far away from my own bees, I have one of my 8 locations, Carisbrooke, which I've designated this year as my quarantine location, and so I would take them there to start with, because Carisbrooke gets the most swarms like this in. They come out of the castle there, where the walls are absolutely chock full of wild bee colonies, and so I get quite a lot of these bait hive swarms at Carisbrooke, and so I'm getting wild bees in there the most anyway, so that's my logical choice to make that my quarantine location. And it's all busy for bees, no breaks ever, apart from when they want to take a break. And so yes, so I'll light the smoker up and we'll get cracking. We'll see what's inside. So before you go looking outside your windows, the noise of sirens is on the video. It always annoys me when I hear sirens, particularly on the car radio, and I'm looking around and it's actually a siren noise for an advertisement. I apologise for that. That's just a feature of being in the centre of Newport these days. It seems that sirens are going off all the time. So I will have to chop this video down a little bit for you because it's a good 20 minutes this inspection took, so I'm going to just cut it down to the highlights. So I do apologise for a little bit more editing than I usually do, and I'm not a qualified editor, so they might jar slightly more than a well-produced bit of video. So there is the crown board as I left it in the last video. And you see my two little bits of wood blocking the vents there. And this was filmed a day later. And so one of the first little things to show you, not entirely connected to the swarm, is that the bees have already started to glue them down. If you have a look to the right of the bee there, those two little orangey lines are propolis, this wonderful bee resin they use to glue things down to prevent them from rattling and to exclude drafts. Now continuing the theme of thinking on the fly here, you'll see when we put a crown board down, you need to put it down bee side up, so you need to flip it over. So you've possibly already spotted the problem here, which is those little chocks of wood are going to fall off. And you see me at a bit of a loss as I'm rather focused on getting past that, and I didn't think at all, because I become a little bit single-minded while inspecting. So we cut to the first frame with any real action on, and you'll see that they've already started to put honey in. So swarm bees fill themselves up with honey from their parent nest before they swarm out, so that they've got the honey to have the energy to be able to make a new home when they find it. And these girls brought a good amount. Look at it there glistening down in that honeycomb. And so sometimes a swarm will need to create their honeycomb to start with, and to do that they have to eat a lot of honey, and then they exude the wax, which is just a high density fat. They exude it in little scales from between the plates on their exoskeleton, on their abdomen. This swarm obviously felt themselves to be in luck, because an awful lot of these frames were actually already drawn with wax, so not only a sheet of foundation, but already drawn out into hexagons. So they were able to put an awful lot of their honey straight into the comb without having to make that comb fur. And on this frame, if you see the bees doing the little barrel of monkeys act there at the bottom, we get to see the behaviour of drawing out honeycomb. And this is a feature of this inspection, you'll get to see plenty of this, that I believe they call it scaffolding, not barrel of monkeying. That's entirely made up by me. But you can see why I call it that sometimes. You get these little chains of bees, and now deep in this comb, which you can see is nice and new, are the first eggs. So what this reveals is that it's a mated queen. So this would be technically what we call a prime swarm, when the old queen, who's already mated, swarms out with the bees. And a prime swarm is usually considered better, and it's the old saw this first week of May. A swarm in May is worth a load of hay, which, if you're not of a rural bend, and might sound a little bit odd, but obviously hay is a highly valuable commodity in rural communities. It goes on, a swarm in June is worth a silver spoon, which is obviously quite nice, but a swarm in July isn't worth a fly. And this is very much sort of early swarms often have a mated queen in, so that they don't have to spend any time getting their virgin queen mated, which can delay things. And it gives them the whole season to get on with it. So a May swarm could even give you honey, if it's quite good. Could give you honey by August, whereas a July swarm is often, a June swarm, worth a silver spoon, is pretty good. But usually it's only got enough time to build up to the level where it'll overwinter well and be good for you next year. Swarms in July, well, I've had honey off July swarms before. It's not a hard and fast rule at all, but in general, a swarm in July is a fairly marginal proposition. You're going to have to work hard and have some good luck to get them through the winter even. Now here, they've built a little bit of their own comb there, which is a little game they like to play with me, because at some stage I'll have to take that off. But you may have noticed that these bees are unbelievably mild. Now, in the afternoon of the day of filming, I had to go out to a hive of mine in Brading, who are very, very angry at the moment, and I may share the video up of that. I haven't checked to see whether it's any good, but I went from mild as milk here to full psycho bees in the course of my day. And so because they were so mild, I wanted to just keep them that way. And one of the things that does really annoy bees is breaking their wax. Now, sadly, I think in a frame or two, you'll see that I did actually have to break the wax, and it's a testament to how mild these bees are that they didn't get very cross about that. And so I'm in a bit of luck with this swarm. It's a decent sized swarm. It's not huge, but it's pretty decent. And they're very mild, and they seem to have come in mated and with an awful lot of honey in them. I'm really hopeful for the proposition. So you see on the bottom here, a little bit more scaffolding. Now the reason that they're doing this is actually because I just stacked these up for storage rather than for keeping bees in. There's a void underneath. There aren't frames in the second layer underneath those frames, and so the bees have decided to fill that void up with their own honeycomb. Now I sort that out and avoid any of those voids and afterwards, but it does mean I have to do a little bit of tidying up to get these in a shape where the beekeeping would be convenient. So here you see a little bit of the wild comb that they've actually completed on the underside of the frame. And so that honeycomb that they've constructed wasn't there 4 days ago. So they've got cracking fairly quickly. And so that just won't do. That bit of honeycomb under there with the bees on, that's got to come off. Now fortunately there wasn't anything on it. If there's eggs and brood and honey and things like that, well, eggs I just feel bad about. It would be better if you didn't have to take that off. If there's honey, well, the bees don't like it, but obviously that's, if you remember a previous video, Kate and I consider that to be beekeepers' perks. Anytime there's wild comb, we then eat that because that nectar, rather than honey, I shouldn't misspeak, that nectar isn't evaporated down enough to be able to store. So there I am, just smoking the bees off that bit of comb, and you see brand new wax. It's beautiful and white. It's a beautiful colour, and then I think it oxidizes into a butter yellow, and then if it has brood in, it goes very dark as it ages. So really nice wax like that is that's been very much unused. That I really consider grade 1 wax, so I take that away and put that aside specially. The only other wax that's of nicer quality as that is cappings wax, which I'll talk to you more about when we get to harvesting time. But that is very much the finest wax we have, and can be used for all sorts of nice applications where purity is important. Wax that's melted down out of the frame is really our second grade wax, and is really for candles if I'm not going to reuse it for the beekeeping. So I have to cut to the chase a little bit here because it took me a few sweeps through to actually find the queen, but she's on this frame, and I'll hold her up for you to see. A nice sized girl, so that's very pleasing. So what I'm going to do, I changed my plans a little bit here, is I'm going to put her and the frame of brood that she's on down in the brood box, the proper sized one, and then put a queen excluder over the top of that so that she can't then get above it back into the super, and then just close up the brood in the super so that it is directly over her, so that we're not breaking up the brood nest too much. And that should mean that the bees will then draw out more in the brood box when she wants to lay more eggs, and she should be fairly happy like that. Now that does mean that we do get one generation of bees hatching out in the super, so all the eggs that are above that queen excluder will pupate and hatch out, but then they shouldn't, well, the queen shouldn't be able to get through the queen excluder, she's too fat, and that should mean that we end up with a hive that is in the right sort of order. So the only consequence of having a generation of brood in that super is that any honey that's then stored in there is disqualified from cut comb, but as I use wire reinforced foundation for the main part, the cut comb thing is not really an important point. I do have some unwired foundation, and I want to do cut comb because we get asked for it by our customers every now and again, and it could be quite a popular product. And so there's just one other thing to show you before I close up, which is another really nice example of the bees doing this barrel of monkeys thing. If you see the 3 little chains of bees across their scaffolding, it always looks fun. So I always like to see it, even if occasionally it means that they're actually plotting on building wild comb just to vex me. And so all that remains is just to consolidate the frames in the supers. So you'll see me somewhat laboriously, because the bees are everywhere, just smoking them off the lugs, pushing them up so that they're nice and close in together to reduce any chance of more wild comb happening. And then I go across to the other super and just pull out anything where they've put a little bit of honey in, and try and give them everything that they've got action on, and take out any empty frames so that there's no more space above the queen excluder for them to do anything, and to try and push the action down below the queen excluder for the queen there. And that's really just about it for the jobs there. And so yes, if you've enjoyed the video, I know it's been quite a long one, but there's been quite a lot of content to put into it. Do please like and comment and subscribe. If you have any questions about it, obviously I know that swarm bees is quite often one of the most fascinating aspects of beekeeping, even for non-beekeepers. And apart from eating honey, is one of the ways that non-beekeepers sometimes get into contact with bees when you have a swarm on your property. So do please feel free to ask any questions about that. I'm always happy to answer them. So thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.